Okay, so welcome to the Way of Soul Remembering podcast with Tom Llewellyn, where we give people a space to share their spiritual journeys and inspire with what they have learned. And I'm really excited and privileged and feel honored to have Sarah James with us this evening, or it might be this morning or this afternoon, wherever you are and tuning into this. She's a dreamer, a lucid dreamer, a writer, has a great love of museums, and she's really, I feel, a pioneer in something that's really precious also to my heart, and that is the reclaiming of the mysteries, particularly the Western mysteries, and a real focus on dreams. And she's really reviving, I feel, the kind of the ancient practice of dream healing in dream sanctuaries. She's doing amazing work running retreats in Greece. So we're going to get into some really kind of soulful material here. So I'm really looking forward to this chat with Sarah. So Sarah, people watching this may not have had an awareness of you and your work. So could you just kind of introduce yourself? And I'm really curious to hear, what led you to this kind of path, this kind of career, because it's a kind of, it's a little bit of a kind of a unique thing that you're doing.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have discovered my special niche in life. But essentially, have always been really, really into dreaming since I was a child. And never occurred to me that you could pursue a career in dreaming. But when I was very small, I had this fantasy of inventing a machine that could record my dreams so I could make other people watch them at the cinema. So what I always thought I wanted to be was a film director, actually, because dreams to me are like film is the closest kind of art, expressive art that feels like a dream. So that's what I wanted to do. But as I've kind of matured a bit, I've always been very into ancient history and ancient culture. And I guess David Luke, actually, he is a senior lecturer in psychology at the University of Greenwich. You probably know David. And he came to my lecture salon in St Leonard's and was talking to me about the sleep temple at Lydney Park in Gloucestershire. And I realized that there was this kind of niche path that combined my interest and love of ancient culture and history and dreaming as a kind of spiritual pursuit, I suppose. So I wrote an article for the Journal of Paraanthropology, must be about 12 years ago, maybe a bit longer actually, all about this sleep temple in Gloucestershire and about my sort of journey in lucid dreaming since childhood. And since then, I've never really looked back. I started to, I ran a lecture series in St Leonard's, which during lockdown, I started to specialize almost exclusively on Egyptology. And because I'm interested in kind of esoterics, religious, spiritual subjects, and that's kind of the aspects of ancient culture that I find most interesting, a lot of my speakers would be talking about magic and gods and goddesses and things like this. And I interviewed some amazing Egyptologists. Salima Ikram came on the show, like some really interesting speakers that are really well known, Chris Norton. And then I started to help my friend Anthony Peake, who's written a lot of books about the sort of scientific evidence for life after death, for near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, time perception, all these kinds of slightly paranormal or para-anthropological ideas. And during the course of helping him like co-host his chat show, I met a publisher from Inner Traditions, and I told them this idea I had for a book, which was exploring the kind of history and culture of dreaming in the Western esoteric tradition, looking at evidence from really kind of like cave art, Stone Age, Neolithic, in Anatolia through Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece. And I wrote this book. And then on, the journey of writing this book, I obviously am very interested in the god Asclepius because he presides over these ancient Greek they're called sleep temples, but really they're holistic healing sanctuaries where one of the buildings within them is for this sacred sleep, for the practice of enkymesis, which is the enkymeterion is, the etymology of that word just means place where people are put to sleep. So there is some idea that it was a holistic healing sanctuary. They were actually practicing real surgeries in many instances. And so they were using herbal substances that could produce the effects of anesthesia. So they were using things like mandrake and poison ryegrass and darnel and opium. to sedate patients and then operate on them. And so some of the descriptions from the sleep temple, there's a big variety there. There's things like, with what seems like absolutely no soporific substances, someone having a divine dream of Asclepius. And then other descriptions are things like someone waking up mid-surgery, being cut open.
Sarah, I need to pause you there for a second, because you said a word and I didn't even know what it means. Soporific. And what does that mean?
Like sleep-inducing.
Sleep-inducing. Okay.
So one of the descriptions is quite scary, because it's like someone woke up and they were being cut open, and they tried to get off of the operating table and they couldn't, and physicians had to hold them down. So there's some stuff like that, which sounds very real, and there are surgical equipments found in these sanctuaries as well.
Wow.
And there's written documents and evidence and inscriptions about actual real sort of physical remedies and surgeries that took place. There's records of a sex change taking place in
so I feel like I want to draw you back to something you were saying at the very beginning, and also I want to kind of help viewers to contextualize this in terms of what time period we're talking about and in what culture. But before we do that, you were mentioning Litany before, and I'm curious about this because I live quite close to this temple, but I've never been there before. And I remember reading, and maybe you could give an insight to this if this is true or not, because I tell people it's true, and I've read this, but I'm not 100% sure. Is it really true that Tolkien knew the archaeologist who was doing some early work on this site in Litany, and they found a ring with a curse on it, and that was partly the inspiration for the Lord of the Rings? Is this a true story? Because I tell people this.
They found.
I thought you might know if this is true or not.
No, he did. So Tolkien actually worked as an assistant for Tessa and Mortimer Wheeler, who were the archaeologists digging the site. They didn't find the ring. They found a tablet with a curse on it because someone's ring was stolen. And it was basically saying, I can't remember the exact text, it's Sylvanus, I think. If like whoever doesn't return this ring to the temple is going to be cursed. And then interestingly enough, that ring was found quite recently, like in the last 100 years, I think, somewhere on an estate, quite, some distance from Lydney Park. So it's quite interesting that they found it. But I mean, I've always assumed that it inspired Lord of the Rings. And I think that Tolkien was really interested in Old Norse language. So he took a particular interest in the Celtic god Nodens that temple is dedicated to, and the etymological history of the god Nodens and what that means and how that relates to dreaming potentially, and how that relates to the Old Norse pantheon of gods and mythology. And I think he thought it had something to do, because I did read a lot about he did like a whole etymological analysis of all of the findings related to Nodens. And Nodens is known as the god of the silver hand, and is a god of hunting and especially of fishing. And you can see the River Severn from that temple.
So the god of the silver hand. So because I've also kind of felt, and I'm sure other scholars have talked about this, that there's maybe a really close connection between Nodens and the more kind of Celtic god of Nuata, or there's something similar in the etymology of the word. And that would be great.
Because in that whole area, you've got Sulis Minerva in Bath as well. But there's a chalybeate spring in Lydney as well. So it's a very iron-rich spring. And so he was definitely inspired by, there were these myths of these little people, like hobbits, that lived in the area of Lydney. And there was smelting, and they were extracting iron ore from the hillside. So this hillside, that is inspired quite a lot of the characters that are dragging the minerals out of the mountains and causing these holes and tunnels. So the tunnels would collapse, and areas of the temple collapsed because this site was so littered with holes and tunnels.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. It's kind of making me feel like I should, put it on my list to go there very, very soon.
It's only open during certain very brief.
I remember you saying that to me. It's only open certain times of the year. Or
it's like it's whenever it's open for a rhododendron festival, which is
it?
But they have the most weirdest museum there as well. Like I told you, didn't I, that when I went there, the guy who owns the estate, because it's a private estate, and they just opened the doors during this rhododendron festival that they have, and the Roman sleep temple is a bit of an afterthought. It's like, oh yeah, go and have a look at the British Romano sleep temple as well here. But they do have this small museum on site where they have all of the stuff that they found there. There's a lot of dog votives actually, but it's mixed with all of the artifacts that someone in the family brought back from New Zealand many years ago. So there's this like mix of stuff from this British Romano temple and amazing Kiwi New Zealand artifacts.
This is incredible. This is incredible. So I'd love to go back to what you were saying before. Some of the viewers might not be aware of the exact time period what you're talking about, these dream sanctuaries in ancient sort of Hellenistic world. So I'd love you to say a bit towards that. And also, I felt, what I wanted to do on this podcast is just kind of come into it with a little bit of poetry as well. So maybe we could just kind of come into it with, there's some amazing poems that, and I highly recommend this book that Sarah's written on the initiation into dream mysteries, drinking from the pool of, and I'll let Sarah say the word because it's difficult to pronounce.
Mnemosyne.
That's it, the goddess of memory. So maybe we could just kind of give Sarah a space to recite this wonderful, wonderful poem, and we'll kind of, we'll let that sink in, and we'll kind of explore that a little bit, and then maybe I'll just, I want to kind of just recite some of my own poems as well, just to help to bring a little creative flow into our time together here.
So the poem to Mnemosyne is part of this collection of poems used by the Orphics, the followers of Dionysus. And it seems like these texts were probably sung and performed as part of a kind of narrative spiritual journey for an Orphic initiate. So Mnemosyne is number 77. So to put Mnemosyne into context, she is my muse, and she is the mother of all of the muses, and I really do think that she is the kind of forgotten 10th muse in some ways, and that lucidity is the kind of expression of her personification. So that moment in a dream where you're like, oh, I know where I am, I remember who and where I am, is the inspiration that Mnemosyne brings. And she is the daughter of Uranus and Gaia. So she is the product of heaven and earth coming together. And she then goes on to be the mother through Zeus of all of the muses. So she's all of the goddesses of inspiration in all of the arts, and even things like astronomy as well. So she isn't just the goddess of memory, she is the goddess of sense making and eloquence as well. So she helps you to make sense of the world. And in some accounts, she's described as naming all the things in the world. And, the ancient Greek language is very interesting because I really see it as being this kind of bridge language between the hieroglyphic scripts of places like Egypt and Turkey, and it kind of communicates the real things of the world, which I think is why everyone should learn hieroglyphs, Egyptian hieroglyphs and ancient Greek, because they help you make sense of the world. So she also helps you something about lucid dreaming, don't you think, that you're making sense of when you become lucid in a dream, you're making sense of this novel scenery, this imaginative realm. There's something about making sense that, because maybe it's something to do with the frontal cortex is activated, so you're able to apply like critical thinking, self-reflection. So for the first time, or in a rare opportunity, you make sense of something that's insensible. So Mnemosyne does sort of, to me, represent that kind of inspiration. So this is an Orphic hymn, and this is a translation I did. In one of my exercises for learning ancient Greek has been to do my own translations of the Orphic hymns, and I would thoroughly recommend it to anyone. And I think it's okay to have a bit of artistic license, which I have applied here. So it's about my personal feelings as well, and my kind of resonance with Mnemosyne as a personification, but it's not too far away from the original. And there are some things, like I was saying to Tom earlier, the translation that most people use when they talk about Mnemosyne as partner of Zeus, his consort, but the literal translation is bedmate, and I just prefer that. It's more kind of visceral. So there are things like that, like we can make choices in terms of what word you use. Like Greek is quite flexible in that way. So this is my translation. I call to you, Mnemosyne, bedmate of Zeus, queen, the muse who serves the holy, pure, and clear voiced. Out of oblivion you appear, remembering eternity, mixing a mortal intuition with mortal blood. You increase the reasoning powers of man, blissful lucidity, obliging in every way. Each heart can know this place from the start and evermore. Do not step aside from the rising tide of awareness. Come, blessed goddess, the initiate of remembrance awakens, begin the sacred rites, and drive out oblivion.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. I really have the sense in that hymn. I think the line that struck me was the line towards the beginning of kind of something about the clear voice in some sort of way, kind of like being the channel for the clear voice and the clarity, which is something that I think we all, we yearn for, that, to have that kind of clarity. And for me, I think that these words like mindfulness or remembrance, even the word mindfulness, the ancient Buddhist word for that, sati, and this has that sense of recollection, almost remembering yourself in the moment. And sometimes people think about mindfulness as like a mental thing, but it's actually also very much about having kind of a sort of conscientious sensitivity to life, conscientious sort of sensitivity to
Well, I've been thinking
life.
a lot.
Sorry?
I was just going to say, I've been thinking a lot about that recently in relationship to this idea of prophecy and epiphany, and how prophecy is very often written about kind of in parallel or in similar terms as the way we think about faith healing. There was a kind of healing that happened in the ancient world that was kind of recognized as this truth revealing, this apocalypsis. Apocalypsis is the unveiling. So for a moment, you're so utterly, totally present, you know and feel your place in the cosmos, and that is healing. And it helps you kind of leave the minutiae and the petty nature of your human life behind, just momentarily, to give you enough space to be reborn. And then there does seem to be a relationship with the perfecting rites of, say, the mysteries of Elefsina, of Demeter and Kori, and when the spontaneous healing events happen in the Encumeterion of Asclepius, under the kind of auspices of Asclepius, Aegea, and Telesphorus, there's this rebirthing that happens. So, it's interesting in the Greek mythology that you have Thanatos and Hypnos being brothers. So death and sleep are brothers. And there's writing that kind of describes the fact that when you visit the sacred sleep temple of Asclepius, the sick self dies and the healthy self is reborn. And they do sometimes, the pilgrims that were visiting the sanctuaries, waiting to be healed, kind of dressed as newborn babies in swaddling clothes in white, because it symbolized their rebirth.
What I'd love to go to now is just to bring it a little bit into our kind of personal experience. And I'd love to ask you, Sarah, have you always been in touch with these things, or have you gone through these kind of dark night of the souls where you were in like the kind of the more of the, drinking of the waters of forgetfulness of your kind of, or have you always been in touch with these things? Because I know in my life, I've definitely had times of sleepwalking through life and like not feeling myself and not feeling quite knowing how to reclaim that energy in a way. And I'd love to hear you kind of speak to that, on a personal level. Is this something you've always been in tune with, or have you also had times where you've kind of lapsed into the oblivion of kind of forgetfulness?
Oh yeah, definitely. I've definitely drank the waters of Lethe before. I think that I was always really into this when I was very small. I think school, even though it was still there, school kind of distracted me, and work distracted me, relationships distracted me, but it's still like an essential part of my character, which you know, I think the whole of life is this process of waking up a little bit more every day. And you can be aware and conscious of that. And sometimes you can think you're totally lost, but then the next step will take you even further. So so it's definitely something that's always been there. I can't remember a time when I wasn't interested in dreams and the nature of reality and perception and all this kind of stuff. But one of the things that I've got really interested in recently, and I think it is for me like this stepping up, or this next level of understanding the nature of life and death, is that I think there seems to be an understanding in the ancient world that life and death are always entwined. Like we're always living and dying in every single moment. There's some cells in us that are dying. There's some cells in us that are being born. And these spirals, like the serpent around the rod of Asclepius, occur simultaneously. So it's not even like when we die, that's it. There's always some part of us that's already dead. There's always dead within life, and there's always life within death.
Could you say that part again about the kind of the staff or the I think sometimes people think it's more like a kind of a tree or something of Asclepius. What did you say, that they're both rising together, the sense of life and death?
No, I was thinking about his staff and like the symbolism of the snake and what it really represents. And his staff is always this kind of like knobbly. It's never like a carved perfect staff. It's always like a knobbly gnarled branch of a tree. So it's kind of a dead branch, you know. And then actually some of the very early ones do show like small leaves growing on it. But you don't see many of those in the later ones. And then this serpent is obviously very sort of vital, like a life force thing, and is always spiraling up this dead branch essentially. So I really think about it as being the serpent of Asclepius, because the serpent is the animal form of Asclepius, is rising and covering and spiraling and overpowering the dead thing. And then Aegea, his daughter, her symbol is the bowl of Aegea, which is a bowl from which she's nourishing the serpent. So it's like you're drawing the life force up, you're nourishing the life force. And then Telesphorus is the kind of completer, he's the perfecter, he's this I mean he's introduced in Pergamon, which was a Turkish holistic healing sanctuary of Asclepius, and he's kind of fairly unique to Pergamon. That's when he's first mentioned and where most of his cult is based. But there's still this concept of, there's the calling to the cure, there's the delivery of nourishment and nurturing, and then there's the completing. And the completing seems to happen in a dark place. You know, like Peter Kingsley talks about the earliest form of dream incubation happening in caves, where people went like animals do to lairs to heal after being wounded and to just recuperate and rest, and then started having incredible visions and dreams.
There's so much we could go into here, but I'm just called to mind that we've not said to the viewers yet, what time period are we really talking about here? Just a little bit, just to contextualize it. So we're kind of in the ancient Hellenistic world. We're kind of, you know, these things were practiced, but they kind of, you know, died out for cultural reasons, the kind of the rise of Christianity in the church and these things. But just to contextualize it a little bit, if you could, for us historically, Sarah, and then I'd love to go back to that symbolism of the kind of the dying branch, because I want to say something about that.
So Asclepius becomes well known in classical Greece about 3,000 years ago, and he's the son of Apollo. And I live in Epidavros, and everyone in Epidavros will have that he was born in Epidavros, but there are some other accounts that he was born in Trichala, but there are all these various different stories. I prefer the one where he's born in Epidavros because that's where I live. And he was the son of Apollo and the mortal princess Coronis. And he was Coronis cheated on Apollo, slept with another man, and either Apollo or Artemis killed her in punishment. And then while she was burning on the funeral pyre, Apollo felt kind of bad about it, so slit her stomach open and rescued the newborn baby, took the newborn baby to Chiron, the centaur, who was trained in the healing arts, as Apollo was a god of healing and prophecy and harmony as well. And And then there's another story here where he was suckled by a wild goat. There's all kinds of like different versions of his myth, but basically he is thought to have learnt the healing arts from Chiron, but then had this encounter with snakes in the forest where he saw or he helped a snake, or there's various different versions of this bit as well. He either helped a snake or he witnessed a snake healing a mate. And there's a sort of motif in Greek myth and Greek folklore that if a serpent licks clean your ears, you have this second sight or second hearing. And a serpent licked clean his ears, and then he had this ability to heal people and even bring people back from the dead. So ultimately he brings Hippolytus, he brings a couple of people back from the dead, and he's seen as depriving Hades from souls in the underworld. So Zeus punishes him by striking with the thunderbolt, and then he dies. And then Apollo pleads with Zeus to bring him back, and he is allowed to come back, but I think he has to dwell in the underworld. They'll dwell in Hades, and so if patients want to visit him, they have to enter the underworld in order to visit him.
Okay, okay. There's so much we can go into there. Coming back to just the staff, and I was just reflecting when you were saying this, do you think they might have been pointing to the fact, and I know this is kind of within ancient Greek kind of wisdom, that really, that almost we are the reality that we're experiencing, what's within us becomes our reality, and maybe that sense of the kind of the dying branch or the dead branch is to sort of point us to the energy of life and of the serpent and the rising, a kind of sense of like it needs to come from within us, because if we just look outside of us to the outside world, there's that sense in ancient Greek wisdom. And I remember that your colleague who's just wrote that wonderful book had that kind of that there was a word of where she was saying that in a way kind of we're born into the kind of a cave of death or something like that, that there's something kind of
Right.
there's this
Yeah.
sense of kind of that we need to find it within us, not the outside world. And in that sense, maybe that's something to do with the kind of the dying branch, as it were. If we look outside of us, we're just going to find death and dying in a way.
She talks about being entombed, like
Mm,
the living essence of each soul is already in a grave of
mm,
flesh.
mm.
And I mean, yeah, I do think that
That's not an idea that you hear a lot in kind of
no.
spiritual circles, that the
Yeah.
body is a kind of
Well, she also relates that to the sacred way when you're traveling on the sacred way from
Mm,
Keramikos, which is the cemetery. So you
mm,
start at the grave
mm,
and you then walk along the sacred way to the sanctuary of Alephsis, where you meet divinity. And Alephsis means arrival, is where the gods arrive on earth. So you are kind of being born from the grave, releasing the grave, and are on this spiritual path. From the moment you leave the cemetery, you're a soul.
mm.
And you're almost like re-bodied, you're re-embodied in the telesterion.
So maybe just, yeah, to come back to our own experience of these things. And yeah, when I was talking before about living on kind of autopilot, sleepwalking, you do not really feel like fully alive in some way. You feel like not present at all sometimes. Like I'm not really like my true self. I don't know quite how to find it, but you kind of feel out of touch with things. And maybe that's also a little bit, what was that kind of saying of Socrates, that the unexamined life is not worth living in some way? That unless you go within, unless you're prepared to go through a process of transformation or even rebirth in some way, you may not, feel the essence of life in some way.
I think that's what all of these sort of initiation, although the ancients didn't call them initiations, and certainly in terms of the mysteries of Eleusina, it was the mystai, those seeking the secret rites,
Mm,
those that were going to go and experience the secret rites. And Maria talks about 30,000 people would make that pilgrimage to the sanctuary of Eleusina. Only 3,000 would be let in, and 3,000 would sit in the telesterion. But out of those 3,000, only a handful of the people would have the experience. Which
mm,
so that points to it's a real felt thing that you can't fake. That isn't about working your way through levels or grades like in Freemasonry or something like that. It's like a direct experience, and you would be preparing, laying the groundwork for this experience for 6 months prior when you meet when you're instructed by the mystagogue who tells you how to live, how to be a better person. And it is about being a better person.
So that was kind of the lesser mysteries in spring, and then the sort of preparation for the greater mysteries in the autumn.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I don't know, it's a bit kind of left field, but I was talking to one of my teachers yesterday, and I don't know if you know anything about this, because I haven't heard about this. He said there was a colleague of Rudolf Steiner who wrote a book about the mysteries of Persephone, and he kind of intuited it through his own inner experience and inner journeys. And apparently when he was in Greece at some point, and he actually got kind of um, sort of arrested almost by people that said that he had gone against the sacred vow of the mysteries by making it public in his book about what happened there. Have you heard about this? And there was some like connection to Aeschylus somehow. Like there was some sense that this guy was a reincarnation of the ancient.
Oh, no, I haven't heard about that. I'll have to look that up.
I'll say I was very curious when Yehuda, my teacher, was talking about this. I was like, who is this guy? And I've never heard about this figure in this book.
Well, there's another interesting thing that we're talking about Maria Maragou, who she's written a book that's like best-selling in Greece and has been best-selling for many years about the mysteries of Elefsina, and very in-depth study of the archaeological site, all of the written textual information, and deep etymological analysis of the ancient Greek. She's an ancient Greek scholar. She talks about this idea of them being secret rites that you can't speak of. Mm-hmm. But she also said that it's not just about revealing the secrets. This idea that it can't, your mouth is closed, which is mistai. The root of that is your mouth and eyes are closed, is that you actually can't express it through words. You can't express it through explanation. So it is about it being secret, and you're not supposed to divulge the rites because there are all these rules and written records of the fact that you weren't allowed to tell anyone on pain of death. But similarly, there's a kind of double meaning of it's inexpressible anyway. You can never explain to someone what happens because it's just a direct experience that you either have or you don't have. And there are a lot of accounts, because Maria was explaining that a lot of the Roman people that converted to Christianity following the kind of decline of the rites then mocked the rites and explained exactly what happened. So we have the accounts of those Christians as well.
There's so much we could go into here. I kind of feel like a little pause for some more poetry. I wanted to recite one of my poems. It's not particularly in relation to anything we're talking about necessarily, but I'll kind of bring it in and see where we go through for this. So this is from a book that I've kind of brought out recently. It's been a kind of exercise with my father for a couple of years. We choose a theme. We both write a poem on the same theme. So anyway, this is what I'm kind of called to read out. Tom, getting off the ground. At 5 years old, on my first day of school, some other children complained I was a bully. One proclaimed it, the other nodded. I remember it so well, the surprise within, the unknowing of what I had done to cause hurt, and the sadness to feel the sense of separation from the group. Is my experience not the same as theirs? I thought to myself. Is this what happens when you express yourself? I felt injustice, for internally I felt myself a good little boy. When we feel separation, how hard it can be to get ourselves off the ground. I remember the joy of finally getting that wooden plane to take its maiden flight. That super thick rubber band that needed to be wound to an inch of its life, then steadying it and letting it go, the plane gathering speed across the school field that was well mowed, the school turf, and finally lift off. At least it did glide for a goodly while. Another time, oh, that poor kite. A special one, well-made, durable, rainbow colors on its first flight, caught in the branches of a giant tree. How I wanted to reclaim it back to safety, but being so high, unless we had enlisted the fire brigade, it wasn't possible. So sad to see it finally decaying to shreds under the Scottish wind, sun, and rain. So that's one of my poems. So how to, I think it does touch on what we were saying before about, when we're going through into that more sort of autopilot, that sort of conditioned way of existing, it can be hard to feel like how we can refine our wings, how we can get off the ground again, how we can kind of, rise from the ashes. And I find as well, as you start to get a little bit older now, I'm 43, your neurological capacity to for transformation can to begin to decline a little bit. So I really think that
I
the
don't.
infants
I think it
understood
gets
this.
better and better.
You
I
get
think.
better and better as you get older.
I mean, I remember a few years back, I was walking behind these teenagers through Hastings Town Centre, thinking, God, it'd be worse than death to go back to that oblivion of like teenageness. So I do think, that the process of life is this kind of dreaming where every day you're waking up a bit more. And I love that idea. They have that concept in ancient Egypt that death is a long sleep, an eternal sleep, and that your soul travels with the sun through the underworld at night. And I kind of like that. It's like every dream, every night is an opportunity to reset and reborn. And you can start every new day, every new second with a different attitude. And you can become a better version of yourself. I mean, this is what that I like about the ancient Greek philosophy, is this concept of perfecting, this concept of being like the best version of yourself, not in an egotistical, not in a sort of shallow way, in a really sort of deep, meaningful way. You can always do a bit better, and everybody makes mistakes, and we all drink from the waters of Lethe occasionally. But if we're moving through life and we're trying to be a bit better every day, I think that that's all right.
One of the things that I'd like to talk to you about is just, what do you encourage the people on your retreats and the work you do about kind of reclaiming a connection to their dreams? What do you encourage people to practice at home? Could you give a sort of overview of the kind of techniques that you would encourage people to get a closer connection to their dreams?
A big part of the practices on the retreats are about connecting with deities, with gods and goddesses, and identifying places, characters, goddesses, entities that people feel strong, powerful resonances with. And also it's about, one of the things I love about the retreats is we'll bring things from the dreams that the participants have into the reality of our travels around Greece. So we go to temples, and if someone's had a dream that, say, for example, everyone had joined hands and was singing a stupid song and singing, running around in circles, then we'll just do that. We'll act out the dream. So we've spoken about doing dream theatre. We do a lot of dream theatre, where the dream is the director and they direct the other participants into a reenactment of the dream. And then every player gives an account of the dream from their perspective. So it really shifts the perspective of the dream, and is really sort of, even with the most simple basic dreams, can be quite revealing.
Oh wow. Oh, wow. That's yeah.
And then I think for me, like, I love the landscape and the land around here. Like, I actually feel like I'm in love with the place. Like, I've never had such a strong sense of, during lockdown, I had a romantic relationship with my local nature reserve and the sea, and swimming in the sea and sunrise became like a big thing for me. But I just have this amazing sense of home in Epidavros. As soon as I arrived, I just fell in love with it. Everyone's been like super friendly. They're so into the fact that I'm into the healing sanctuary of Asclepius and love the culture and I'm learning ancient Greek, that they're really welcoming and really friendly and really nice and super laid back and hospitable. So I love that. And it's just like, you know, the Japanese introduced this idea of forest bathing. And I think there was an aspect of that in the holistic healing sanctuaries that's really important. They're like incredibly beautiful, biodiverse, rich, abundant surrounds with beautiful, like perfect architecture, with healing, clear waters. So the whole of that holistic sanctuary. So I live in a little village called Palaire Epidavros, and then up the road about 10 kilometers is the most famous holistic healing sanctuary of Asclepius, where there was a sacred sleep temple, and various other ritual buildings. And all together, they offered this kind of holistic healing package that included things like psychodrama. So the theatre, there's a huge, great theatre. People come from all over the world to see the Theatre of Epidavros. It seats 14,000 people. It's acoustically perfect, but it really is medicine. It's like drama medicine, expressive art medicine. It acted on the human soul to encourage catharsis, the purging of emotions, to bring emotions to the surface and allow, you know, the pilgrims to release their bitterness or their frustration or their anger. So you know, it's hard for us to imagine that would be medicine, but that was one of the very well appreciated forms of medicine in ancient.
This is the thing that I've been contemplating a bit recently. I remember, yeah, like a couple of years ago, I was reading some of the plays by Aeschylus, if that's the kind of the best way to pronounce him, and the kind
The
of
one who was killed by a tortoise landing on his bald head.
the what? Sorry.
He was killed by a turtle being dropped by an eagle, or a tortoise dropped by an eagle.
And just I don't know if you know about this, but apparently my teacher was saying that he only half completed the mysteries of Persephone or something like that. There was something that he seemed to know about kind of Aeschylus and that, or his brother was an initiate or something like that. But anyway, the reason I'm saying this is because in some of those plays, when it talks about the sort of the rites of Dionysus, they can seem very wild and quite violent in a way. Although Dionysus doesn't seem like that. He's more a kind of like composed leader of that aspect of life in some way. And although for us, when we read it, and the characters in the play as well, they kind of make fun of the idea that in some ways it can just seem like complete chaos or like wildness. There is this sense, and I was kind of reflecting a bit on this recently, that I think for where I don't know, maybe everyone's like this around the world, but particularly like for kind of more Westerners in the way, it's like it can be so healthy to act these things out, you know, act out our darker sides of our kind of personality and or at least give them space and to kind of almost like when you act them out, they can kind of cathartically release, or you release yourself from being kind of under their shadow in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, theatre's a safe space for that kind of religious frenzy to take place. And the rites of Dionysus that turned into Greek theatre were kind of agrarian rites and rituals of like the celebration of the harvest and the maturing of the wine. And, you know, he's a god of the vine, and his mysteries are the death and resurrection of life, really. He's kind of very much woven into the fabric of the Greek Orthodox Jesus, I think.
Okay.
Easter's massive in Greece. It's much bigger than it is in England. The Orthodox Easter's the biggest festival they have all year, and it's debauched to some extent. You know, it's really
hard for me to imagine kind of, you know, living in England that a Christian festival would be like that. Well, maybe I just need to travel more and see how things are done in other places.
Because I think, you know, Maria Marigu was saying to me that when the Christians destroyed the site of the Sanctuary of Demeter and Kore, Elefsina, the Hierophants continued to initiate, let's use the word initiate because it's the word that we're familiar with, at Plato's Academy. So Plato's Academy is just up the road from Elefsina, and the Hierophants were still initiating people there. And then because they had quite high status, the philosophers and the people working at Plato's Academy, they inserted some of the rites and rituals and symbolism of the rites of Ephesus into early Greek Christianity. So you look at Mass is like theophania, it's that sacred communion where you're sharing a meal with the God, you're sharing the body of God. And that's why I think Greek Orthodoxy feels so Dionysian.
This is reminding me of what I experienced when I had a journey, I've written about it on my blog, and I won't go into all of the details because it was quite personal what Persephone was saying to me. But I went on a kind of underworld catabasis journey down into the underworld, and I kind of met Persephone, and it was a very, very curious experience because at first her form was very um moving and changing, and it was kind of some sort of incredible energy that I was witnessing. And I felt I received some sort of healing. Well, I asked to receive a kind of healing from her in some way. And her form was changing. Sometimes she was this incredibly beautiful young woman. And then her form changed. And it was funny because at some point she called out like with a very strong I. And it almost woke me up like from the experience. And I don't know what she was going to say. I mean, you could say it might have been I am Persephone. I don't know what she was going to say, but she sounded like she was going to say something like that. And it almost woke me up. But then I kind of just went straight back into the experience. But the setting for the experience, I can say this much about the experience now, was in like a banquet hall. It was in a banquet hall, like an underworld banquet hall, and there was this huge table and there was food. And I was asking her at some point, how can I kind of live with integrity in my work, making, an income from these things, but how can I live in integrity? And she just kind of fell back into the table and she just was with the people in this banquet. And it was very moving because it was such a sense of love in a way, like of community and love and being with the people. And all of the food was kind of feta cheese and like roasted vegetables and things. But yeah, there was something about the kind of the being with people in life, being with people in life, sharing love. I mean, that's what I kind of got from that experience. You were talking about the kind of the symbolism of the banquet hall then, so I'm not sure if there's some connection, but
Yeah, so there's a
it was a very vivid experience for me. And it was incredible because she was wearing this dress and it had kind of pomegranate sort of symbols on it. And she was just yeah, it was a beautiful experience for me. Mm.
Yeah, they have a banqueting hall at the Sanctuary of Asclepius. So one of the most important healing rites from Neolithic times for healing was this theophania, this offering to the gods, this sharing a meal with the gods. So you would prepare a feast, you would eat some of it, and then you'd burn the rest as an offering to the heavens. So that smoke of that burnt food goes up to heaven and nourishes the gods. And there's evidence of that. They found ash altars at the shrine to a Neolithic goddess that predates the Sanctuary of Asclepius in the valley. So that was always a really fundamental, essential, important part of the healing process. This is the strange thing with researching this stuff as well. People kind of seem to divide into two camps, which is weird because for me, the Sanctuary of Asclepius is all about holism. Like Agia, people say that her name means health, but really it means wholeness, soundness. It's like it is, she's the epitome of holism. And, if we're whole, we can be healthy. So it makes so much sense to me that the physicians, the temple attendants and the priests of Asclepius looked at every single aspect of the human organism and the human soul and tried to bring them into harmony.
I love that. I love that. I'm quite, sometimes you go and see kind of healers or people that claim to be clairvoyant and they just give an assessment like they can just see but it's almost like a grandiosity in a way. Like they need to prove they have this insight. But I was always taken by, there's I don't know if you've Robert Moss, who talks about them quite a lot, the Kogi Indians in Colombia. And apparently when their mamas, their healers, are assessing someone, they listen to the person for sometimes days, like for days, to really understand this person's experience, their life, everything about them, and then they go into a council and they assess what needs to be done. But I love that, like the sense of having so much kind of time to really understand,
Yeah. I mean, you think
the
I remember.
person on all levels rather than just the quick.
Totally. I mean, I remember I haven't got a doctor's anymore. I haven't got a doctor's. Haven't had one for about 10 years. But the last time I went, I remember there being this little LED digital display that's like only 15 minutes and you can only have 2 problems per doctor's appointment. And when you look at, so for example, yesterday I was in the sanctuary of Asclepius and there's a stone tablet with a description of the cure and the remedies that were prescribed for one patient, and it's completely thorough. It like looks at absolutely everything. It's like making offerings to gods. It's a diet regimen. When certain things don't work, it's changed and they do something else. They go and sleep. They have books read to them. I mean, it's everything. It's amazing. It's really detailed and precise and specific to an individual.
Mm. That's the kind of the attention. It would be good to have more spaciousness in our in our culture for.
I
So
think we massively underestimate as well. One of the best eye-opening experiences I've had from being here is how much you can change if you live somewhere beautiful and healthy. Like being somewhere beautiful and healthy, your body and your soul and your mind kind of calibrate to,
mm,
and I think about, if you live in a very sort of cluttered, chaotic, dirty place, or it's cold and miserable, you aren't surrounded by like friends and people that love you, then this all affects you. Because I think that generally speaking, in the past, there was less of an attachment to an individual ego identity. It was like more you were part of a collective. And
yeah,
so it was very easy and intuitive to recognize that you're more than the sum of your individual parts. You're part of
yeah,
kind of constellation
yeah.
of moving parts that you can be harmonious or disharmonious with.
No, I think I resonate with that. It's that sense of if I was living in a vibrant community, if I wasn't well in some way, it would be noticed, by the
Yeah.
community, and then
Yeah.
it would be the process or the person to go to. But many people, in fact, probably the vast majority of people don't have that. That
No.
kind of like
No.
communal noticing of what's wrong
Yeah.
with Tom. It doesn't like see himself.
Yeah.
So how to bring that back, Sarah?
Everyone moved to Epidavros and rent a little peach bungalow and visit the holistic healing sanctuary of Asclepius. And
Okay.
yeah, I mean, that's what I would like to do. I would like to build a holistic healing sanctuary, like nothing too serious, no operations or anything. But I
You
mean,
could
even
bring
if
in, you could employ surgeons, you could get
I could actually, yeah,
doctors
if there was,
together.
I can't believe how badly like
You know,
hospitals and doctor surgeries are designed. It's like there's no concept. Well, I mean, this is exactly the point. In ancient medicine, physicians considered individuals to possess souls, that we had a non-physical dimension, that we had a soul, that we had feelings and emotions, and that's completely been cut out and severed. Like the way that modern doctors deal with patients and the kind of horrific almost torturing environments that patients are placed into, with horrible strip lighting and disgusting food and horrible wards. People try their best, but it's like we've
yeah,
forgotten. I
I
think
don't,
up until
I don't
recently,
have. I need to be careful what I say, but I haven't had many good experiences going to see NHS doctors. Maybe one in my life. He said a really beautiful thing to me, and it was very comforting at the time and very affirming, and I felt, but
I think they're a bit
often,
like teachers.
often it's not like, um, if I went in there and started saying, well, I'm a bit, you know, concerned about my dream life. I think, this is a sign of my ill health. What do you feel about this? Or even just on the level of nutrition, unless they give a reference to see a dietitian, there's not much that they're willing to say about it. It seems completely like lopsided in a way.
Yeah.
But to bring this back to, yeah, so our environment, how we feel, where we live, what would you kind of, with your retreatants when they're going back into their everyday life, which probably isn't like your retreat, beautiful sanctuary, how do you encourage people to kind of set up their space, in terms of their bed, how they sleep, what type of bed, their lighting, to create an environment that's most conducive to restorative and nourishing sleep.
Have the head of your bed facing east so
Mm,
that you're aligned to the sun rising and setting, and then try to create a mini sleep temple within your bedroom, and just understand some of the, you become quite kind of intuitive about what makes a healthy, good feeling space. It's kind of like ancient Greek feng shui, so you have preparatory rituals before you go to bed. So you take like a sort of small, simple version of the kinds of activities that they practiced at the Asclepiad, and you do like a miniature version. So you don't watch like horrible TV with people having their throats slit before you go to bed.
yeah.
You have a purifying bath. You have a fragrant and clean bedroom. You read books, you read novels, you read beautiful things, you see beautiful things before you go to bed. I think beauty is a bit underestimated in terms of, the effect that can have on our body, mind, and soul, and is
Mm.
a bit few and far between in the modern world in terms of,
It's a very strange idea, that, isn't it? The beauty is not. Why do you think that is culturally? I know what you mean, but it's a kind of strange idea, isn't it? That we don't.
I think there's just been an accumulation of like these thought forms through like social media and the various ways that media can get into our psyche. I do think about, you should consider the way you would consider food, like the food that you eat affecting your health. You should consider the things that you see and the books that you read and the music that you listen to as affecting your soul. And
Mm,
that's something very obvious that ancient people
yeah,
just took for granted.
yeah, that is. That's very much in the well, it's very much in the Eastern tradition or yogic traditions that the mind is like a crystal. Whatever color you put in front of it, your mind crystal kind of takes on that. Or, within the kind of hermetic tradition, that you become what you kind of surround yourself with in some way. So it's a kind of, yeah, I know, yeah. So okay. So we kind of need to kind of revive the sense of um beauty in some way. And yeah, so it's kind of, I think for me that's partly why I kind of love writing poetry in some ways, because I find it so cathartic, and it
Yeah,
brings me back to myself, and then the sensitivity to life, and then the sense of the beautiful nature of life.
yeah.
And as soon as we start to perceive life as being potentially beautiful, then we're much more willing to protect it, but also set up the conditions of our life that are conducive to
I
that
think
sensitivity. And it's like, as you say, a lot of us these days, including myself, in an off time, we just become, you know, kind of yeah, the monkey mind is just, it's difficult to get off that sense of someone's just messaged me on Facebook. I need to respond instantly. I need to do this. I need to do that. You're always in like this kind of left brain sort of a state of agitation in some way.
absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that people all report after being here for a week is the incredible sense of stillness that
Mm,
because I lived on a main road for a while, and I'm quite sensitive to sound and vibrations in things, and this place is so still in comparison with anywhere else I've ever lived, that I think that in itself just creates this kind of expansion of your awareness, because you aren't stretching your tendrils of awareness in multiple directions. You can just be present.
yes.
Like the first night I arrived, I just had amazing dreams because I hadn't got my Wi-Fi sorted out, wasn't checking any messages. It was just this amazing sleeping in pure stillness, no sound, no roads, no
Mm.
noises of only electrical things. It's just very, very quiet. And I think quietness and darkness, lend themselves to dreams.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that. The kind of sense of the kind of, yeah, going into the darkness. You were referencing Peter Kingsley earlier on, and he talks a lot about that. the kind of the in the well, we can do it now through what we I never like the word sensory deprivation because it sounds like you're kind of depriving yourself of it's you know, I know through sensory deprivation practices you really your senses become much more alive afterwards. And some of my teachers have always encouraged me, you know, if when you reduce your input in different ways, then you kind of, you know, your senses become so much more enlivened. I've been very much kind of reflecting on the Plutarch quote recently that the mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled as such, because we can just, you know, kind of just, there's a very different way. And I was reflecting on this recently of when, you know, this sense of sometimes you read the same book and it's almost like you've never read it before,
Yeah,
even if you've read the
absolutely.
whole thing, especially after you've come maybe from a retreat or a deep experience. And the words are like this nourishing soul
Yeah,
food.
totally know what you mean.
And it's like, and you feel the life of it and you feel the life of the person who wrote it and you kind of connect to it. And it's this very funny thing. And I was reflecting on this because sometimes, you know, when I read and I'm in a less sensitive state, I'm just reciting the words in my head
Yeah.
that I'm reading. And it's just like the words, and it's kind of more on the level of information. But when you read in that more sensitive way, it's like food in some way. And you,
Yeah, well, I think that's the difference as well. I can't. I think Joseph Campbell talks about this, the difference between poetry and prose, and how
mm,
poetry invites the imagination of the reader to fill in the gaps, and there something's created in the imagination that wasn't there before. Um, but I know exactly what you mean. I had like Rudolf Steiner's Knowledge of the Higher Worlds on my bookshelf for years and
yeah,
looked at it and never really
fantastic book,
connected
wonderful
it.
book.
And then read it after doing Vipassana or something like that. And it was before I did Vipassana actually, but read it after I'd done some other practices. And it was suddenly like the book was directly talking to me. It was amazing. And it became like this guide through my reality at the time. It was really magical. So I absolutely know what you mean.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful, like, I remember reading Shakespeare in those kind of states as a kind of young, yeah, late teenager, early 20s. And it would just like, it just sent me into this kind of almost this ecstasy or this
Yeah,
bliss in some
I
way.
get
Because
that
he
with
was
music.
someone so who was so connected to life, had such a humanity, a compassion, and understanding of human nature. It almost became just reading, you know, a sonnet or some part of Shakespeare. It was almost like a mystical, you know, it became like a mystical experience in some way.
Yeah.
So that's a beautiful thing if we can kind of if we can touch upon life in that way. I've written down a kind of an inquiry here, but I want to check in with you about time in terms of how much time do you have this evening? We've kind of
Well, it's 9:30 now, so I kind of like to get off fairly soon because I don't like to look at a computer too much before I go to sleep. And I've got into Greek time now. So maybe
okay.
like 20 minutes. Is that good?
I'm sorry.
20 more minutes? Is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
good?
Well, that's perfect. That's absolutely
Right.
perfect. Um, I have my written thing here, but
Mm.
do you have anything you'd like to bring? Do you have any questions for me? Do you have anything that's alive within you that you kind of want to bring to our viewers or kind of the people watching this? Um, how do you kind of feel about it?
Well, I guess there's a few different things. Every time I think, not that I know it all, but that like, oh, I think I know a lot of stuff about ancient dream cultures. There'll be like some new thing comes along and changes and revises my idea about stuff. But I think that's why it's really important. You're talking earlier about knowledge that comes from books and knowledge that comes through intuition. Like there's something really valuable about always still connecting with the intuition and feeling into things and sensing things and getting to the essence of things, because I think that's what really appeals to me in all of this. Is I'm terrible with dates and with like historical well, maybe not place names, but anything that involves numbers, not so good at basically. But I feel like a great sense of resonance with the essence of a lot of the things that I've learned about ancient Greece and ancient Egypt. Like it makes sense to me in a lot of instances. And if it doesn't make sense to me, then I'm more curious to try to make it make sense to me in some way. But I think that this idea of dreaming with gods and goddesses is something that we can all do, and that gods and goddesses and entities like that can act as a way of focusing our attention on a specific dream goal. So if you set the intention of meeting a particular god or goddess, this is what I think was happening for a lot of ancient dreamers. One of the things that I always say to people about lucid dreaming is that if you've got a crush on someone, if you see that person in a dream, it arouses your attention and arouses your body and alerts you to the fact that you're dreaming. And so often lucid dreams are ones where you meet the object of your affection. So I think for ancient people, they went specifically, and this has happened like way before the classical period of Greece. This was happening in Mesopotamia and Egypt, in Anatolia. There was always this idea that a temple to any particular god or goddess was the sacred precinct of that particular divinity, and that they could appear to people that were sleeping there. So to focus your attention, when these ancient kind of dream descriptions talk about when the dreamer encounters the god or goddess, you can feel from their texts, their stories, that the dreamer is really excited and elated to see this god and goddess in a dream. And to me, because there isn't really a word for lucidity, there are kind of words that hint at a more conscious dream, but there isn't a word like we would use to describe a lucid dream exactly. But I think this expression of elation and bliss and ecstasy kind of does express it, because lucidity is often associated with this bodily sensation of bliss and ecstasy.
Well, with that sense of bliss and ecstasy, maybe we should use the remaining time. We had this idea before, and it's a bit of an experiment, but we were thinking about, leading a meditation. So we've kind of talked about a lot of things. Hopefully people have found it inspiring, and there's so much we can check in, and people can check out Sarah's website and the retreats that you do. Maybe just let people know, what is your website? What's it called?
My website is themysteries.org.
Okay, and that's the place people can find out about Sarah's work. That's the place they can find out about her retreats in Greece, sometimes also in Wales or in the UK as well. And and also Sarah's doing amazing stuff at British Museum tours. If you happen to be in London, check them out. So what we thought we'd do, and we need to discuss it, how we're actually going to do this a little bit, because we're not pre-planned this, but just with that sense of kind of being led by the goddess, being led by a deity. We had this idea of leading the listeners through a meditation that we will kind of subtly channel, or kind of feel the flow of the energy of it, and we'll kind of, one of us will see how it works, taking turns. And this can be interesting, because sometimes when I've done this before, I try and lead it in one direction and someone can lead it in a completely other direction. So we'll see how it is. But does that sound, so shall we have a go at that, Sarah, and see what happens? Should we, do you have a particular deity that you'd like to kind of bring into this? Shall we do it?
Well, there was an encounter I had today that struck me with Cybele. So there was a statue of the seated goddess Cybele, or Cybele, or however you want to pronounce her name. So she is a very ancient goddess who is often thought of as the mother of the gods, or the mother of mountains. And she's often depicted sitting on a throne with her feet resting on a lion. And this particular statue was an archaic Greek style in the Museum of Corinth. And on one side, she had a carving of pipes, like pan pipes, and a pine cone, and some pine branches. And on the other side was the triple goddess Hecate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's just a very beautiful statue that really struck me. I like Cybele as a goddess.
Is it possible to have this? We can add it to the video later if necessary, but is it possible for me even just to see an image of this statue, so I can connect to the feeling of it a bit more?
Let me send it to you.
So what culture was this goddess first kind of?
Greek, but kind of like she seems to come from the north.
Okay.
She was very important in places like Samothrace and the mysteries of the great gods in the sanctuary of the great gods.
Okay.
But I really loved that there was this statue next to her as well. This particular triple-headed representation of Hecate holding the torches, holding the keys, and then this thing you can see in the images that I've sent you, this picture of the pipes, which I've not really ever seen that anywhere before.
Oh, the pipes on the side of the statue. Hmm. And you said she's associated with mountains.
Yeah. So at Samothrace, there are these great gods and they have secret names, and they do seem to be kind of really earthly giant gods in some way. And the main god is the mother goddess, the mother of mountains. And there's something about like carving the statue of the goddess out of the actual mountain rock, where
Oh, wow.
the rock of the mountain is then perfected into the form of this goddess. So you're still adoring the mountain, but the mountain in the form of the goddess is like the purest statue you could have. And at Samothrace, the initiates had magnetized iron rings to identify themselves. So there was a magnetized lodestone that probably been struck by lightning and was
Okay.
and so the ancients did have an appreciation for the force of magnetism.
Oh, wow. Okay. So yeah, I think you have, yeah, a connection to this goddess. So what maybe I can set the I can begin the meditation, then I'll hand over to you and you can
Okay.
flow with it. And maybe each time you want to hand it over to me, just say Tom's now or something now, just say Sarah now. And we'll just see how things flow. Okay, so everyone, we're going into a time of practice now. So wherever you are, listening, watching, lying down or sitting, just going into a sense of a deep, deep permission to slow down. So many things Sarah and Tom have talked about, inspiring things, important things. And there's opportunity to go and explore Sarah's work, Tom's work, these amazing things we've been talking about. Deep, deep dream healing in the sanctuaries of life. And just allowing ourselves, sometimes we are more in a set state of forgetfulness. Sometimes we're in a state of remembrance. So wherever you feel like at your point in your sacred body and in your mind and your spirit soul, just honoring that, noticing. And just preparing your body. We're going to go on a little bit of a journey through this meditation. First, though, just giving yourself a sense of just really being held where you are. The earth holds you. You don't need to hold your weight, just a sense of sinking, slowing down. And all throughout this practice, just allowing the breath to come and go. The breath is your friend, your ally. Having a sense of the sacredness of the journey through the imagination, but also the sacredness of your vehicle, your body. So now just beginning to conjure in your imagination. Everyone's built differently. You might zoom somewhere in your imagination. For others, it might just be a felt sense, a tactile sense, or just a feeling, sense, a hearing, a smelling, touching. Just taking yourself to a mountain. It could be a mountain that you know in your life. Or if you stretch, move in your imagination, it could be a mountain as you imagine it in the ancient Greek world. Mountains are big things. In comparison to a human, a mountain is enormous. Just taking yourself to the base of the mountain. And at the base of the mountain, you're just gathering resources because you are going to begin to climb the mountain. You need to be resourced to feel the energy in your body, the body that you have in your imagination at the base of the mountain. And as you begin to climb the mountain, Sarah is going to take you further now on this journey up the side of the mountain.
So take a moment now to just deeply inhale the fragrance of the forests. Smell of pine needles and tree resin and sap oozing from the trunks. Feel the air cool and crisp upon your face. The richness of the red earth beneath your feet, soaked in the blood of the goddess, the mother of mountains. Listen to the breeze as it blows through the canopy of trees, bristling the pine cones and needles and branches. Sense the scurrying claws of squirrels, weasels, the wings of birds, the buzzing of bees. Stretch your senses into the forest like spider webs. The slightest vibration, the slightest, subtlest scent. You hear a pine cone land heavily on the earth, and you bend down to pick up this perfect form, feeling the weight and the texture of the pine cone with your fingertips in the palm of your hand, feeling the shape, compact, solid pine cone, not yet opened to release its seeds into the world. And imagine the top of your dream skull open, feeling the light of the sun warming and illuminating the upper surface of your brain. And now place the pine cone into your head and bring something of the mountain, something of the goddess into your body, into your skull. Feeling the bones reform over the top of your head, covering the pine cone, the seed about to burst with life, burst with ideas and possibilities in a dream space. Listen and try to feel for the pulse of your mother, your maker, as she throbs through the earth, through the land beneath your feet. And take a walk upwards into the forest, into the clouds, into the coolness, smelling and sensing and feeling the bark on the trees, stroking the branches, full of lush green pine needles, sticky with sap, fragrant, healthy and thriving.
And as you are there on this top of the mountain, close to the clouds, close to the divinity of the sky and of the mountain, with this pine cone vibrating inside of you, helping you to see more than you've seen before, hear more than you've heard before, feel more than you've felt before. And as this begins to happen, you see a goddess come towards you. She is a goddess of the mountains, a mother of the mountains. You can tell she's an ancient, ancient being. And she comes to you, and as she approaches, you know she wants to take you somewhere. You're not sure where yet. You have a feeling that she wants to take you inside the mountain. You have a feeling that she wants to show you something that will be useful in this moment for you to experience. She's a goddess, a mother of the mountains. So she can open up a gateway through the top of the mountain to go deeper, deeper into the mountain. So feel yourself descend inside the mountain. And she takes you to a sacred cavern inside the mountain. And there's a fire burning inside there. And as you sit by the flames inside the cavern in the mountain, something is shown to you. It could be a memory from your life. It could be about someone you know, a loved one, a family member. It could be a word, a thought, a feeling. Where is the goddess of the mountains taking you right now? Allow yourself to be guided. So tiresome always to be self-led. And whatever you're beginning to see or feel that this is a gift of the mountain and of the goddess. And because it's come from this sacred place of wisdom, it must be possible. Allow yourself to bathe in the energy of whatever you're receiving. Claim the image, the feeling for yourself. Integrate it. Now, I don't know what's going to happen, but Sarah is going to take you now through the journey.
Feel yourself inside the omphalos, in the center, the navel of the entire world. This mountain, this goddess, is the first born, the first thing that rose above the primordial ocean. And you are inside in a generative chamber where all things originate from. In this cavern, you watch the flickering flames dancing upon the walls, and you see the goddess who appeared to you as a human in the outside world turn into pure, gleaming, polished stone. But her stone body, her true body, has a potent and powerful aura, a magnetism that you can sense in every cell, an orientating power that directs and brings you back to the birthplace of everything. You feel this rich, nourishing energy pass through your body, restoring and recalibrating your body, mind, and soul, bathing you in a kind of chthonic dark radiance, perfecting and embracing you. The goddess has two female attendants come to you now, draped in fine linen with gold diadems around their heads. And one presents you with an iron ring, a beautiful black ring that they slip upon your finger, and upon it an image of the seated, throned Kybele, her feet resting upon a strong lion, her hair loose around her shoulders, cascading over her breasts. And you feel an energy in this ring they place on your left hand, on your ring finger. And this energy draws you towards the stone statue of the goddess, black and brilliant, earthly and primordial, the original being, gave birth to all humanity, all life on earth, sprung from the insides of this mountain, this great mother mountain. And you take this ring with you as the attendants lead you out of the cavern, one stone step at a time, leaving the smell of the fire, leaving the warmth and dance of the flames behind you, feeling the magnetic pull of your ring to the stone statue of the goddess become more and more subtle and faint, like a silver thread guiding you back to the origins of everything, to your birthplace, the birthplace of the entire world. And you travel back into a wooded glen on one of the mountain slopes and sides, and you walk carefully and lightly over the earth, breathing in the fresh, living fragrance of the pine trees, of the spring flowers, enjoying the warmth of the sun upon your head, and feeling the potency of the seed planted in your brain that will blossom and flourish in your dreams, providing seed after seed, life after life, journey after journey, for all eternity.
So just feeling the seed essence wonder of your journey with the ring, the connection to the goddess. You can always journey back to the sacred place. Remember the offering that she gave you in the cavern, and begin to come back to your physical body. Come back, come back, come back to a grounded sense of your body. If you're ready for sleep, just drifting off. Or if you have other things to get on with in your day, just moving fingers and toes, bringing movement back to the body. Moving back to the body, preparing yourself to come to the end, but also the beginning of integrating this into your life, what you've learned, your experience, coming back to everyday awareness, opening your eyes.